Hi everyone, and welcome to another piece discussion video, this time focused on the piece Wish from the series IOI2. IOI2 is an 8-piece series in the postmodern body of work that explores the transcendent power of authentic human connection over top of the means through which it's transmitted. It is ultimately a series about hope, and specifically a hope for those instances where two individuals are connecting via the internet or technology, but their connection goes beyond that scope and is ultimately a prefigurement of a real-life connection waiting to occur, rather than those instances where a connection is contingent upon the technology through which it's made. For a more in-depth look at the series, I will post a link to the series overview in the description of this video. For now, however, let's turn our attention strictly to Wish. I'd like to begin by first discussing this piece's relative order in the overall IOI2 series, as well as its title. So this is the third piece in IOI2, and it's rounding out this sort of subtle introduction, this trifecta, if you will, which encompasses the first three pieces: Looking, I Hope You Like It, and Wish. It's a small start with somber tones. It's sort of like the winter trifecta in some ways, one might be able to understand it as. And that's because this is the final piece that is depicting a sense of hesitancy, but I will explore that more when I discuss the conceptual elements. As the title, Wish is meant to recall the hope of sharing this connection. It reflects what is longed for by the sender, what the sender wants this to mean, what the sender wishes the recipient will feel, understand, or how the recipient will be affected by this image being shared. Wish is also a reference to an album by The Cure of the same name, and it's an album that has become very personally significant for me, particularly associated with early and quiet winter time in my life. And so that's why, as I mentioned, this piece and the other two previous in IOI2 focus on sort of a winter slumber. There is a lot of connection here with me, not only with that time of year, but my own personal experience of that time of year as well. The album itself, though, and the emotions the album explores speak to me in a lot of various ways, particularly the sentiment of relationship and of longing. And that's another reason why this feels like a more of a sincere connection than just merely my own personal subjective reference, but rather it feels like there's much more that's explorable from the emotional aspect with this piece. So again, Wish, as the title, is functioning a bit twofold, because on one hand it really is speaking to that notion of what the viewer of the image is wished to experience by the sender, but also this extra connection that I personally have to this album as well. Next, let's break down the piece's composition, and this is a very cropped and heavily photographic appearing image, which is done very deliberately, and more so than the previous two iterations. The figure is visibly in a room. The window behind him is similar to the one found in Looking, and he is cropped, but he is also very detailed, and his image is very pronounced, so he becomes a focal point. I wanted to evoke a picture message being sent in the way I compose this image, and so the rounded 90-degree beveled line around the central part of the picture plane is meant to resemble that of a smartphone's silhouette, if you will. You'll notice as well the icons on the bottom of the image that are sort of faded but present are again meant to evoke the idea of social media or other icons one would find on a phone screen or interface. Also along that same line is the plus icon on the top right, which is naturally sort of a symbol associated with uploading an image or taking an image. The intersecting text box is very ethereal and dissipating as it sort of moves into this central shape as well as the figure himself. It's overtaken by the figure, and the positioning of everything in this image is generally off or altered or compromised, which is really the major focus here. The agency is within the figure, and so he is able to overcome all of the accoutrements of the technology that he's having to use, essentially. And this obviously draws us right into the conceptual aspects of this piece, because while Wish still remains in that docile, uncertain aspect of IOI2, this is an instance where the figure is very much beginning to overcome, in a more substantial way, the means through which it's transmitted. In his expression, you'll notice there's a bit more confidence or just a bit more certitude than was previously seen with "I hope you like it." Again, there is an agency here. He is captured by the image and being sent in this form, but at the same time, he's able to express himself with more confidence in this case. With regards to the text in the text box, there's more than a flash in my eyes. It again returns to the title because this is what I really want you to feel. This is what I hope you to feel. This is my wish in sharing this with you. And so these sentiments are moving forward, that this person is unsure, is definitely still a bit uncertain about how this image will be received, but he's very forthcoming in his desire for how this image will affect the recipient, and ultimately that him sharing this will foster their connection and will spur it onward rather than come with risks of it falling apart. Again, this concept of the IOI2 trifecta, these first three pieces in the series that start in a docile or somber place that are meant to begin things in this quieter sentiment, are meant to move onward with hope, and that's what Wish really does. This piece is meant to be transitory in the sense that we are moving away from sort of the fear into a greater sense of hope that was beginning to be noticed in the first two pieces, but is now beginning to take hold more effectively. Wish anticipates a more human-centric identity to IOI2 as it moves beyond this third piece and into the rest of the remaining 8 pieces in this series. And that's another reason too why it's so important to highlight the fact that these 3 pieces are functioning in this way, and that this third piece is sort of a gateway into the rest of the series. As I was describing with the composition, he is very deliberately rendered with a lot of detail, and again, it's meant to foster the sense that he is overcoming. And again, from a conceptual aspect, that is really one of the major things here, is that he is able to overcome these means that he's using right now, and that his image is very pronounced and again is the focal point. That the other more chaotic or cropped or off aspects of this image and the imagery are secondary or noticed after, because it is ultimately he who is coming through the image and who is being reflected most prominently. There is a shift with Wish that is also noticeable in the color palette, as the warm tones are very noticeable in his image. And this also is a good segue into the emotional aspects of this piece. It is still a winter image, as mentioned. It is certainly soft, somber, but it is interrupted, and that is the major focus with Wish, that yes, it is still a night image. As one will notice in the background as well with Window, there are stars very deliberately created in there, but they are a bit more fanciful. They are less realistic stars, and that was another choice made in order to evoke a sense of playfulness, a sense of foregoing the realism, to hasten the sense of docility, and to create a peaceable sentiment or a whimsical sentiment that ultimately warms the heart more so than the previous iterations would. The composition is a bit messy, but again, it's very forthright, so it offers something in the way of joy, where you can tell that the person may be hasty, but it's a haste that's done out of love. It's a haste that's done out of a desire to get this image to the recipient so that we can continue our conversation, we continue our connection. And so that goes back to that emotional idea of playfulness or whimsicality that I hope Wish embodies to some extent. It is very subtle. We still have a lot of ideas here that are dealing with uncertainty and a notion, because again, remember that the title itself, Wish, is still created with a sense of baggage that we hope that this is what will occur, but we can't be certain. And so there is still a bit of hesitancy here, but there is much more here than the previous 2 iterations that are moving in that idea of warmth and joy and just the playfulness that comes between 2 people who are interacting together and sharing a lovely conversation. I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about this piece, and I hope ultimately this video just helps to foster a deeper connection between you and the work itself. I hope you'll share it with anybody else who might find it worthwhile, and until the next one, take care everybody. Thank you.